Did you just buy your first dirt bike and you want to go on a ride, but you don't want it to break down on you? There's several things that I like to look at and inspect on my bike real quickly before I go on a ride so that it doesn't break down. And it doesn't take much. So the first thing you need to know is, does your dirt bike have gas in it? Does it have fresh gas? So just pull the cap off, look in there, you can shake it around, make sure that there's enough for your ride. So if you're going on a long ride, make sure to top it off. And if you pull the cap off and you know the bike has been sitting for a while, then give it a nice whiff, smell it, make sure it doesn't smell like old gas. It's kind of like smelly paint varnish or something. It just doesn't smell fresh. If you use old gas, your bike is less likely to start and it won't run as well with unreliable throttle response. And this can dirty up the carb, and if you keep running old gas, it may gum up the carb, causing it not to start or idle or run properly. The next thing you want to check is oil. Here's the oil dipstick. Most dirt bikes have a dipstick or like a sight glass here where there's a little window and it has two lines, minimum, maximum, where like this dipstick, it has these cross hatchings or lines. So this is the minimum and the maximum. You just want the oil to be somewhere in between there. It's best if it's at the top, especially when you do an oil change. But the way to check it, you just stand the bike upright so it's straight. You wipe the dipstick off first, and then you rest it back in there. You don't thread it in, and you just quickly pull it back out. And I can see that there's oil about halfway up. So we're good on oil. Make sure that there's oil on there and that it's not black and sludgy. If it's black and sludgy, it needs to be changed. And if it's not showing up on the dipstick, hopefully it didn't do any damage, because if there's not enough oil, that's more likely to overheat and seize the engine. So if it's low, fill it up. And then if you have a dirt bike with radiators, such as this one, then pop the radiator cap off here when the engine is cold, because if it's hot, it's gonna blow in your face. So you just pop it off and you look in there. Maybe might have to shine a light if it's dark. The coolant level should be above the fins, and if it's not, you might have to tip it over a little bit. You might have lost some out on your previous ride, or if you didn't check it before buying your used dirt bike. But if you have to tip the bike all the way over to see any coolant, then there might be a bigger problem, such as a water pump leaking or a bad head gasket that's causing coolant to leak out there. Next thing I like to check is the tires. Now, if you're new to it, then you want to get a tire pressure gauge. So if you have a toolkit with you, this is really quick and easy to do. So you can either use one of these air pressure gauges with a nice dial, or you can get the cheaper pencil one, which usually isn't as accurate, but it can give you close enough readings. So all you want to do is just check the tire pressure of the front and rear before you go on a ride. I got an article that shows you what pressures are best, but generally around 12 psi is a good starting point for front and rear. And if you don't check the tire pressure, which I occasionally forget to do or I'm too lazy to do, and what can happen if you haven't ridden for a while, or if you don't know that there's a slow leak on the tire, you could start riding when there's only like 1 or 2 pounds of air, and it won't take long to put a flat in that and then just totally ruin your ride and your weekend. Next thing to check is the chain. This one is maybe starting to get a little bit loose. Yeah, I could probably tighten it up a tiny bit, but if you keep running your dirt bike with a loose chain, not only is it going to be noisier, but it's more likely to jump off the sprocket, and if it comes off, this can get jammed up here in the front sprocket area, and if you're going really fast, all that force is going to get bunched up in there, and this can actually crack the case. That's why sometimes if you look at enough used dirt bikes, there'll be a nice crack in the case up here, which can potentially cause an oil leak. And if you have to split the cases, that is a major job. And you can see on this one, it says keep chain adjusted, lubricated for 1.25 inch free play. So this, if I measured this would probably be about 1.5 inches, maybe close to 2 inches total. So I probably want to tighten it up just a little bit, but it's good for a short ride right now. And then lubing the chain, especially if it's a non-O-ring chain, just a standard chain, keeping the chain lubed regularly will make it last longer and it won't seize up from sitting. But I don't do it before a ride because that can get really messy depending on the type of chain lube or wax that you're using. So I like to go on a ride as long as it's not dried out. And at the end of the ride, the chain will be nice and warm, and then I spray my chain lube on, and this gets, when it's warmed up, this will get the lube into all of the little rollers, and then it won't be messy the next time you go for a ride. It'll already be nice and lubed up. The next major thing that I always pay attention to when I go for a ride every time is how easily it starts, and then I also listen for any new sounds, whether it's a ticking, a knocking, a grinding noise, a whining noise. You might not be super familiar with your bike right away, but it's just something to be intentional about listening to, getting to know your specific bike. And once you hear a new sound and it doesn't sound good, then you want to shut it off and start inspecting it to figure out what it is. Maybe you just recently did some work to it and forgot to put something back together right, or there's an engine problem looming, and if you keep riding it with that noise, it may end up with a major failure out in the middle of nowhere, and you could actually get hurt if it locks up on you while riding. If you're following along on my 30-day, 30 video beginner series, then chances are you're new to dirt biking. It's awesome to have you here. I want you to check out my next video coming out tomorrow, as it explains everything you need to know about the controls on your dirt bike and how to use them and why you need to use them properly. So please share this with a friend, a spouse, a sibling, family member, so that we can get started dirt biking safely and on a budget. I'm Kelly Fager from Motocross Hideout. Learn more, ride more.